Hi, this is Alex Bryant. I want to thank you all for joining on today, signing up. We got a lot of people signed up. It's going to be a good webinar. Obviously, the topic is resonating quite well. And this webinar really is for those who have facilities on the ground in China, right? And what's the transformation that's occurring over there, the types of transformations we're seeing, and what we're doing about it, helping, and what our client challenges our clients are facing. You can see here on slide 2, I'm covering the topic of the webinar agenda. We'll have a brief introduction of East West, introduce the two speakers, and then we're going to get right into it. We're going to have the operational supply chain transformation at the U.S. owned facilities. Really, when we're talking about transformation, what does that mean? What are the risks involved? How do you execute these? And then we'll go through 3 specific case studies of U.S. manufacturing companies that had transformations at their own China operations, and then we'll get into the Q&A discussions. We got a lot of questions that have popped up. If you have a question, while you're listening to this, if you have a question, we encourage you to ask questions and encourage you to ask questions while we're doing this, rather than having to wait. You can ask them online. So if you go, you'll see the icons at the top, I think, top corner of your screen. One of the icons says questions. If you type the question in, we'll get to the questions and it'll come to us, and I'll be able to ask speakers. If we don't get to all the questions involved, we will file with you in verbally or in writing in the next 48 hours. So, and secondly, after this webinar is over, you'll be sent a questionnaire or survey. We encourage you to fill those out. And so let's go ahead and dive right into this brief introduction of East West. Right, we're going now to the next slide. East West is an operational consulting firm. I know there's a number of companies on here, the former clients that know who we are, but for those who don't, right, we're an operations and an operational execution firm based on the ground in we're operating in 5 markets, right? China, Southeast Asia. We've got people on the ground in Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam, etc., Mexico, Central Eastern Europe, Poland, and then also the United States. And all the people that we have at East West have all local, on the ground, boots on the ground, and they all have run U.S. companies on the ground in those markets, right? So all of our people have had P&L responsibilities and had to run U.S. divisions in their various markets of China, Southeast Asia, Mexico, Eastern Europe, and the U.S. We do 4 things. We're not lawyers, we're not accountants. We're the operations team, execution team. So we get involved in global manufacturing supply chain footprints, which you can see on the screen. And that's everything from closing facilities to establishing facilities to setting them up, rationalization. And we're seeing quite a bit of that now, going from China into Southeast Asia and Mexico. Second area we're involved in is operational and commercial performance, and that covers all of our M&A due diligence background, corporate turnarounds, and also for companies that have facilities, we're oftentimes helping them turn those facilities around, and also conduct the diagnostic assessments if they're having challenges at that facility. Third area is supply chain, everything related to supply chain, supplier identification, qualifications, supplier improvement, supplier transition. Third is on human resource risk management. That practice, we do an awful lot of interim general management. We're going in and putting an East West person into a facility that is having trouble. Oftentimes, it's a general manager that is not performing well or has retired, or left, or been terminated, or there's fraud and corruption. They've had to be terminated. And we also do a lot of executive search work. Okay, so here are the 5 markets where we are: the U.S., Mexico, Eastern Europe, China, and then Central Eastern Europe. Here's a brief sampling of our client base. You all will all be sent a copy of this and the recording, so you can follow with this at a later time. Let me jump right into the speakers. We've got on the speaker list, we got a great one. We got Dan McLeod, who's director at East West. He's based in the U.S. Li Xiao, the director at East West. He's based in China. Dan, if you would give a background on yourself, and Li Xiao, if you would do the same.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Yeah, Dan McLeod. Been working with Alex at East West for about 8 years now. Prior to that, I was in Asia for 21 years, split between China and Southeast Asia, stationed in Singapore and the Philippines for a year or so, working in primarily the chemical industry, but also a bit in food processing and electrical equipment manufacturing. My background is in engineering and came up through engineering, operations management, uh, management and oversight of large capital projects. And then, and with that background in when I was with in Asia, spent a fair amount of time operating facilities, but also establishing supply chains and overseeing large investment projects. And since starting East West, I've been able to work on similar type projects, factory setup, site selection, uh, factory closures, supply chain extension, and been able to do that not just in China, but also in Southeast Asia, Mexico, and Central Europe. Li Xiao?
Thanks, Dan. My name is Li Xiao, based in Shanghai, China. I have more than 25 years experience working with multinational firms in China, especially on business transformation and turnaround projects. Last few years, mainly worked with M&A, restructuring, and interim GM assignments, primarily for US and European private equity firms and also mid-sized multinationals. I'm also currently the co-leader for North America in ATTA, which stands for Asia Transformation and Turnaround Association. I'm very happy to take today's opportunity to share my experience and discuss this topic. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Li Xiao. We're going to be tapping into that experience here. So why don't you've got now a clear sense of East West, who we are, introduction to speakers, but let's get to the meat of this. First, we're going to look at briefly in part three around operational and supply chain transformations at U.S. owned factories in China. This is our client base, it's U.S. manufacturing companies, privately held or publicly traded, that have operations on the ground in China. And what are they seeing on the ground? We're going to look at identify what they are, talk about how the challenges companies are facing, and then we're going to get into three specific case studies before we get to the Q&A. So, Li Xiao, I'm going to turn this over to you. We're now the first kind of the core drivers we've seen over the last 5 to 7 years. Kind of briefly move through that and then get into the details of it, if you would, please.
Sure. Thanks, Alex. We actually, in East West, we have seen mainly three drivers forcing or pushing the change on transformation. Primarily strategic reason, financial reason, and operational reason. Strategically, as most of us understand, geopolitical and tariff reasons, China is actually having many companies doing China plus one strategy. But one major failure we've seen is the internal organization. They don't have the right resource and right people in place. So that's one of the challenge. Well, sadly to say, we actually helped many companies to close operations during the last few years. On the financial side, we can see companies are facing challenges on rising costs, margin shrinking, and also shareholder demand for higher or better improvements on financial statements. Operational wise, the main shift is from pure export oriented, now mainly targeting in China for China, and then looking for different operational footprint. So that's the major three reasons for us to start this topic. But we will not go through the how, whether to do transformation or not, but rather we'll focus on the how. And let's come to the risk, which is the next page. So transformation is not easy effort. In China, we have some unique or specific risk we would like to share with everyone. The first one is about strategic and governance risk. We can see U.S. headquarters usually initiate this kind of projects. However, in China, it's not that a local manager doesn't want to listen to the guidance from abroad or from headquarters. They have their own realities. They have the practical issues to face. So that's why it always causes dilemma, and there will be two different voices, one from headquarters, one from local China. So this kind of misalignment is one of the challenge or risk. We have one Suzhou example, which had a very typical issue like that. And data transparency is also one major issue we've seen. One of our Shenzhen projects, we've seen that it's coming. The local team cannot provide the same data as the headquarter gave us. So that gives some confusion when we do the modeling and also plan the next steps. Operation-wise, this hidden risk of costs not so clear, because the local management team or the U.S. management team, they don't have a prior experience to this, especially on budgeting and complex items such as the IT restructuring costs and the other complicated machinery relocation costs. Another reminder on talents. This is quite critical because we can see if we deliver not so transparent message or a negative message to the local team here, they may leave, and they may actually think this transformation is a kind of downsizing or a way of closing down the operation. And supplier disruption, that's something also happen, can be another risk. Um, and lastly, on the legal and compliance side, because China is more in favor to employees when we do the restructuring and transformation on HR side, the risk can be much higher than before. Environmentally, when we relocate a facility, it's usually we may need to apply a new environmental permit. It's much longer than we thought, and we always need to make sure we have the right connection, right communication with government, and go through this message before the implementation. So these risks can lead to failure, and we would like to go through some of our examples, which is next page, of our some of our projects. Commercially, usually apply to product line, distribution, sales team, and marketing transformation. And relocating or winding down a plant. It's also with many kind of projects like that we talked about before. Insourcing and versus outsourcing. So the trend is more company taking from insource and looking at possibility to outsource them. Quality control improvement will also, which we'll address in our case studies. Okay. Let's see where we are.
Going to the last slide, which is the phase of solutions.
Yeah, we now talk about our solution, because all the risks we've addressed, we need to face these potential risks. So we will structure this in three phases. First one, we always recommend our client to form a China-US team, involving the local China team there, so they can be part of the team and take the directions, and also then assessment, and also before the kickoff. That's also very important, making sure the data are right there, and both US and also China have the same data and the same direction. We can set the same tone for the future communications. Phase two is the plan. We're making sure we have the same plan for both US and also for the local team. And we always encourage the team to give positive messages and also transparent messages to the future local team, making sure we can keep them in place, and they can make sure the talents are there. And the last but not least is the implementation part. It's quite very, very important on execution. We'll try to keep track of order change and knowledge in-house, so we can do the feedback and learnings in future. I'll always keep a good track of the project plan, and then we can analyze and feedback to the team what's to be adjusted along the timetable. So yeah, that's our main solutions, and let's get down to the
Now
key.
we're gonna we're gonna turn our attention now to the case studies, right?
Yep.
And on the case studies, if you can see it, we've broken the case studies down into. On the first slide, you'll see the background and then the EWA solution, and the second slide is the results. So that's kind of our format. We broke it down into the background, the solution, and the next page the results. Alicia, I'm going to turn over to you here on slide 17. If you would take it away for talking about our Ohio-based client that we just worked for.
Thank you, Alex. Yes, this is one of the typical example of transformation here in China. The issue is um, fairly obvious because the previous GM had fraud and corruption issue. Along with that, the retail operation got overexpanded. So that's why the company is making loss, and we couldn't see the break even in the next 5 years. So the situation is very, very severe, and we provide a solution, which is to place the IGM right there instantly, stabilize the situation, and also looking for turnaround opportunities. The main areas are we step into the team and then assess the main team member and make sure the operations will be stabilized very quickly. Another one we initially looked at is to close one factory and half of the retail shops to make sure we are surviving. That's the second, and also we look for opportunity with other external partners to generate revenue and profit. Lastly is to recruit a full-time GM, make sure we can have a smooth handover. So these are the background and our solution. If we move on to next page, then we'll quickly move on to the result. The 6 elements of the transformation we did was we closed out 5 shops instead of 20, and we sold 15 out of the 20 to our external partners. We shut down one factory, which was planned, and opened 3 new stores. Of course, we find new GM, very capable one, and change their full functional leaders because of the change of the previous GM. Okay, we can go down. We can talk about this more in detail one by one. With the team change and after very detailed communication with the US headquarters, we evaluated the retail shops very closely, and that's why instead of closing down 5, we can see that 15 are actually has potential, and we can sell this to other partners, which can generate profit instead of paying paying off the debt. So in that case, we saved a lot of money for during this sell-up phase, and then to get a more positive message, we opened 3 new stores, which get a lot of attention from the market, and it generates very impressive outcome of on revenue side, also on the profit side. So with all that concluded, our profit turned to positive 15% over 9 months. And previously, when we stepped in, it was minus 20% for the previous year. So at the end of the project, we conducted executive search and find a very good general manager in place. And then the handover is also very smooth.
Alicia,
So,
I hate to interrupt you. We just had a question pop in. The
mhm,
question was, someone was on the phone listening to this, asked, given the current environment, what's going on in China, right? With the market soft in China, it's not a robust market. Can you talk a little bit about their question is, how difficult is it to recruit, identify, and find really good general managers or sales directors right now in China? Can you just touch on that based on some of our recent executive searches in this particular market, right? Which is different than when the market was booming.
Yeah, it is a different kind of condition compared to 5, 10 years ago. We always, when we have this kind of situation, we always sit down with the client to really understand the profile, what we are really looking for. For this case study, because we have been in the business for quite some time, for about 9 months, we know exactly what we would need as a GM, what kind of quality we would need, what kind of background we would need. So to have a successful candidate, we always would try to understand what the qualities we would need. Talent-wise, we're not really concerned. We in China, it's big enough. We have big enough talent pool, and rather the difficult part or the essential critical part is to really find the right fit, right? What can be a good fit? What background this person should have? How many kind of year experience? What functions this person has been gone through? And also, on the other hand, we will try to share as much we could, even though sometimes can be confidential. We share with the candidates what the company is going through, what kind of stage this GM will come join, what challenges they may face, what opportunities he will get, right? So that's the main thing we will try to cover at the very beginning of the project, making sure we can find the right talents to fit this job.
In this market that's a little softer, are you finding people less apt to switch to new opportunities? Or are they more aligned with? They're more focused on money and making sure that they're getting a pay raise and a little hesitant to leave what they're doing. How do you address that at all?
Yeah, this is interesting because China is actually really having a um, totally different time period as before. Previously, people are kind of enjoying their fast increasing pace, but now the company is having challenge. Also, the talent is also having challenge. They may reach the bottleneck. So it really it depends. For certain talents, they are looking for a higher level of experience, higher level of exposure. So if this experience or this new position fits right into his vision or his career path, this could be a easy convince. So again, a right fit from both sides, right? If the company is trying to looking for a stable talent, not just aggressive talent, that's also fine. But we just need to be upfront and then try to make a transparent message communication to the candidates.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for answering that question for them. All right, now
Sure.
we'll turn the second one. You've got slide 19 around the Minnesota equipment manufacturer. If you would address that case study.
Yes, this is a typical supply chain transformation project. The client has a different side of issue comparing to the first case. Um, what the customer have is they have really large number of SKUs, hundreds of them. And the volume, the annual volume for each part, for each SKU is actually not that big. It's also hundreds. So given this operation in China, so the cost is becoming a big burden. And that's why the client is really struggling with the profit. So another issue is the operation lease is getting to the end, so it needs to be relocated in the next 6 months. So when we had this assignment, we had a provided solution is to first assess the whole supply chain, the group supply chain, to understand the spending and also sourcing channel. And we also identify opportunities to see where can purchase more effectively, and which area or which country can be the best location to purchase those materials. We also support transition to the new supplier, making sure the orders can be um, um, changed to the new supplier quickly and also without any problem. Of course, we also relocated facility to a new location. So that's our solution. If we go down to the next page.
Yep.
And we achieved 4 elements of transformation at the end. So we had 4 different product category new suppliers, and we relocated to a new facility. We transfer the local production unit to the supplier, including the machinery and also the manufacturing staff. We also during the whole process we found out a potential compliance risk, and we managed well before it goes wild. So firstly, on these 4 product categories, we identified 3 suppliers in China. Each one of the category all reached 25 to 40% saving, and one category actually in Eastern Europe with 40% savings. All these are undergoing quite extensive research, and we spend time also on the transition together with the clients. On the relocation side, we actually find a very close by supplier, which is a renowned supplier in the industry. We managed to sell the machinery to the supplier, and also because they are willing to accept the manufacturing employees. So that's making sure that make sure our orders and knowledge transfer is very smooth at the end. So that's that's a good achievement. Also worth mentioning that we find during the whole process, we find the Chengdu, the China operation actually had a social insurance issue. So they didn't pay enough social insurance fund and housing fund for the for most of the employees. So we identified those issues and reported to the headquarters and quickly resolve those before we move on to the new location.
That would have been that is a definitely not what you wanted to, definitely not a situation when you find something. That could have been a tremendous problem for them.
Yeah, that was a big surprise to the management team in the US.
That's against the law and bad. So we got it resolved, but it could have been a real problem for them.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're on slide. Thank you, Michelle. We're now on slide 21. Do quality and operational transformation. Dan, I'm going to turn over to you, and if you'll tackle this one first. Dan, you're on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry, Alex. Okay, thanks. So yeah, this was a Midwestern client, a hardware manufacturer that um, we'd done some work with a few years ago, and they have an operation in China that's had been operating relatively effectively for a number of years, 15 years or so. But over the last several months, as the business picked up, as the plant volume has gone up, the quality uh, performance of the site has gone down dramatically, um, to the point where uh, the rework cost, the materials that would arrive for assembly in the U.S. had to be reworked, and the cost of that was becoming excessive, thousands of dollars a month in rework costs. So um, we were approached by the client to come up with a proposal to help them turn around the situation. And what we came up with was really a three-step process. One was to conduct a quality and operational audit of the site to really understand, not just from a quality system, but from an organizational culture, an operating culture, what was going on. Second phase would be a targeted, using the results of what we found in the first phase, developing a targeted quality training program, and provide full-time quality engineers on site to uh, continue the training, reinforce it, and monitor progress. And then after a 3-month period, follow-up audit to review the uh, review the progress made. Next slide, Alex.
Sure.
So, so after the 1 week factory audit, the first phase, we found generally three major issues that were at the root of the problem. The local leadership was not really didn't have an appropriate uh, quality training, quality orientation, quality emphasis on their priorities, and didn't seem to have a really clear understanding of the consequences or the impact on it, the organization in China, the operation in China, plus their customer, which was really the factories in the U.S. The production output had been a concern with factory output increasing up to 40% the last several months. Quality assurance and testing staff had not been adjusted appropriately, and so the impression was that a lot of material was passing through inspection. And then again, they were relying on inspection at the last step rather than have appropriate quality systems, checkpoints in place along the way. So with that information, we developed training programs for them. Started out pretty intensely for the first month. And then from there on, it was a weekly session for the balance of the 3-month period. And then subsequently, after 3 months, we continued with monthly training and development, stayed in touch. So in addition to just inspection techniques and data collection, we also trained the site in basic tools like statistical process control and root cause analysis, and develop the appropriate scorecards and KPIs in a reporting format that we could use to measure and communicate results, but also to have it available in real time online so that folks in the U.S. could also access the results. And so after 3 months, after this period, period of pretty intense training and monitoring, we had reduced the defect rates by about 70%. And it's continuing to trend down as we continue to stay involved. But we took a big bite out of it in the first 3-month period. So.
That's great, Dan. I think that for that client, there was a big cost they were paying because the product wasn't made properly. They were exporting it to the U.S. and then having to do the rework in the U.S. and that was expensive. For the U.S. cost to rework, it was their own cost of goods sold. So it was a big that we needed to fix that because financially it was not making it profitable operation. All right, so we moved into the Q and A session, right? Q and A discussion here, and we've got these are 11 questions. We've got some of uh, these were asked by the residents and other people. We've got them on the screen to show them. If someone, again, if you have a question, please feel free to add it and send it to us, and we'll get to it. As we're looking at the questions now, just on the very first one, right on the Q and A, there's always when you're doing a transformation, whether it's an operational transformation or relocating facility or Q&A improvement or supply chain alternative, right? Or uh, carving carving out the and selling a certain part of the business, whatever the transformation is. right? There's always question number one. There's obviously a need to get rapid cost savings, right? But the risk of disrupting the business, disrupting your relationship with your customers and your suppliers, and the trade-off. So, just starting off, Lichelle, why don't if you will take question number one, and Dan provide any follow-up if you would.
Yeah, sure. This is actually quite common questions, and we've experienced that also quite a lot. Um, we have one actually live example we had recently. One of our Chengdu project. We planned this well. Actually, we can try to avoid this trade-off or balance. When previously when we started this project, there is a question about actually production disruption, right? If we do transform or do the relocation from in-house to an outsourced supplier, so how do we manage that? So what we did was to plan safety stock. Of course, not to build too much, but to adjust that according to the timeline and according to the progress of how and if we can find the right suppliers in place. So we have planned contingency plan and also on the based on the different timeline. So that's one way we can and always suggest our customer to plan it out, giving different scenarios, and then make sure there is a risk remediation plan ready. So hope that could answer this question.
Follow up on that.
Yeah, I mean, one comment that comes to mind is early on in the project planning and when you're trying to evaluate potential results, if you're talking about a change in suppliers, a supply chain, supplier change, there's need to talk through how that's going to happen in terms of a phase in and a phase out of various suppliers. Again, a long a long phase in of a new supplier would you would expect to reduce risk, but it would also delay any savings that would result from the change in suppliers. So that that discussion needs to happen in detail by all the stakeholders on the project and be clear going in at, what the assumptions are, because we've seen mistaken assumptions on that when the savings come and will come, but it's not on the timetable that some people assume going in.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
What we've seen. We
yeah,
got
we
an
should always
example
be
right.
conservative on the savings.
Yeah, and very clear about when those savings are kicking in. That's exactly right. And Alicia, I think you found that sometimes the team I mean, just thinking about this, the team sometimes on the ground in China may not have a whole lot of experience with certain transformations and have a harder time coming up with the costs involved, right? You talked about hidden costs of these transformations. Is that correct?
Yeah, it really requires cross-functional um, kind of double check and then communications.
Yeah. So if you look at it, kind of leads a good lead into the second question about working with the China management team, and the message to the vendors, the employees, the local government, your customers, your employees. Dan, why don't kind of if you would talk about that a little bit and share an example.
Yeah, and yeah, we don't want to underestimate the importance of communication with various stakeholders in the operation. People could come in contact with the operation. Now, uh, if it's an organizational change, management or leadership change, um, usually the communication requirements are a little more straightforward. Where we've seen potential for problems, larger problems, is in the case of a factory closure or shutdown, where you've got what if, when the information gets out, then you have customers and suppliers with obviously a lot of different questions. So what we've advised and worked with clients on is develop a very comprehensive communications plan and have uh, all this prepared in advance, ready to issue upon when word of a big event becomes public, and that way you can get the work done up front and minimize the dealing with emergency phone calls from suppliers or customers.
Alicia, anything to add to that?
Yeah, this is like Dan mentioned, this could be very, very critical, especially at the early stage. But also sometimes confidentiality may apply. So how to manage that sensitivity, and also how to talk or make the communication, that's very critical step. But involving Chinese management team is always helpful because they know the local culture, they know their employees and team members. So we involve them and then have them come up with structural or constructive opinions that would help the plan.
Yeah, that kind of a good lead into question four. Dan, if you would take question four about some of the local China teams lacking cross-functional leadership, and how do you guarantee that? Because we've seen examples of that when it's done poorly, it really affects the ability to make these changes on the ground in China.
Yeah, many organizations in the country, if they don't have a single general manager point of contact to lead the organization, it uh, one that's not a terribly common framework, but it's not uncommon. But where it works, or where for it to work, it's going to require quite seasoned, matured, experienced managers in the functional leadership in country, and that's a bit rare sometimes. And we've seen situations where uh, with with that situation in place, if you don't have uh, strong direction coming from overseas, then things break down quickly. So where we've had significant transformation projects that uh, we've generally developed a steering team with both the local management team and the headquarters management team, so that to maintain a consistency of message and consistency of communication between functions and between the headquarters and in China.
Yeah, and in some of the scenario, actually, we East West would take some of the steering role
Yeah,
in our weekly meetings and monthly meetings, making sure the functional leaders will be there and the messages are communicated throughout, and then we can feedback to the U.S. headquarters about the issues and challenges, and so making sure everybody on the same page, and we can be the playing that role sometimes.
That's a good. You bringing up the HR piece of it, and that's a key piece of this transformation. On question six, we talked about we've got this scenario, just had this scenario at another facility. You've got a strong, say, plant manager at the location. How do you retain that key talent through this transition? Because you're going to need to have them or someone like that. Li Xiao, you that one, please.
Yeah, that also fairly common. The local managers are very, very strong, but they may have different views or different vision about transformation. So usually this confusion is coming from intransparent message because they don't really know. They hear something, but they don't really know what could be happening. So we always recommend the senior leadership team, when the message is clear, when the direction is clear, we have one-to-one communications. We involve HR manager, we involve the general manager, talking to the strong team member and making sure they understand what really means this transformation means for them, what relocation means for them, what closure means to them. So they should play an important role in this. and they will have also future important role in this organization. So that would be a very critical process to go through, and also listen to their feedback and what could be their concern, right? And then how the company will address their concern, and how the company will actually grow together with this employee.
And I think you just worked on a project of medical
Yeah,
client that had that problem. Can you address that a little bit?
this was um, this was a little different situation in which the client had decided that they were going to announce a site closure long in advance rather than announce the time of shutdown. So this was well known, and the communications with the site manager had been upfront, and they recognized early on that they they wanted him on board. And again, this through a closure and relocation. And so basically the discussion was along the lines of a retention, a completion bonus, and how long different milestones to be met, and payments to retain based on achieving the milestones. And it turned out really quite well. Again, but that was a situation where the manager and the headquarters had a good relationship, and they could have an open and constructive discussion. So.
So if we got a question here around from a client asked on the case studies. One of the case studies that talked about, Li Xiao, you mentioned about carving out. Um, I think it was the engineering department and selling that, or that moving to another
Supplier.
company.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'll go back to that slide. The person was asking the question about that. Um, I think that was on um, I guess this piece right here. Um, can you talk? Can you talk about that specifically? How you got them moved to you transferred the production to another supplier? How you did that? Their question was
Yeah.
they they're looking at the same thing, but then how do you execute on that?
Yeah, we I can elaborate that a little more, because the from the client side, if there's no supplier actually willing to accept these employees, the only channel or the only way is to let these people go, right? So because the client would not have any position for these employees. So that's the worst case scenario. We have already planned it out. But in the meantime, we have, when we look for different suppliers, we have the first message to them is whether they can make these products. They are whether this new project will be interesting to them. And attached to that, which is optional, if they would like to accept employees, experienced employees, and with very good knowledge and skills about these products, which can help them to get this new order from the client. So we have different priorities when we communicate to the suppliers. Of course, not all suppliers are interested in getting employees, which to them can be a liability, can be a burden, can be a risk, right? So among all five, actually, we shortlist to five different suppliers. Three of them have good interest actually accepting these employees and assets from the client. So, and then we communicate with the client. They're happy that they have three different options, and they have three good suppliers to work with. So we then ended up with a negotiation on conditions. So that's how we manage this process. At the very end, both parties, the supplier and the client, are very happy about the result, because the client can avoid paying the severance to all the employees immediately, and also the supplier are very happy to accept these experienced labor and also experienced product knowledge in-house, so they can quickly get on board with these new orders, and they don't need to have plan for phase in, phase out, these kind of issues. So yeah, this is roughly the process.
Yeah, it was a good. That certainly the client was very happy not having paid any severance and improve his existing supplier. Um, when you're looking at this right here, you're looking at question 9 about we just talked about the what you did there to carve out that those list of employees and transfer them over to supplier. Can you talk, Li Xiao, a little bit about the typical mistakes, pitfalls when you're seeing kind of projects? I think you've got one in Guangdong that you did recently that's a good example.
Yeah, there are typical learnings from that. The one major one is the leadership. Because when we see, when we go into a business, we can see that some of the middle management or leadership team, they don't really have positive um, impression about transformation. They don't want to make the change. So that could be a very major bottleneck, or a difficulty to carry out this kind of project. Another thing is when we do execute this kind of project, there's not much milestone checker. So we may lose track of what the progress, and sometimes we have people coming back to us and saying, okay, can we move down to the next level? I mean, if we don't, if we lose track of this project, then it can go pretty wild.
And I think you've got an example of that, don't you? You do it one you worked on recently.
Well, we've seen situations. I mean, uh, one of the bigger mistakes we've seen companies make is underestimating the amount of planning and coordination that need to be done and the preparation required to have an effective uh, communication or announcement of challenging situations like a major restructuring or a factory shutdown or relocation. It, the communication needs to be prepared, scripted. The impact on people need to be well thought out. The financial implications of uh, you know people being retrenched, that needs to be all understood and laid out and available when the questions start. And we've been involved in situations where that did not happen, and we were called in after the fact to help uh, calm the situation down, de-escalate, and get people talking together and coming to an agreement on a factory closure timetable and severance arrangement. So when you don't have the planning done, when you don't have the communications planned and in place, you don't have your I's dotted, your T's crossed, that's when things can get out of hand quickly, and that's a big concern.
Yeah, we saw that at another facility we were working on down in Guangdong province. Um, this kind of conversation leads well to question number 8 about can this be done remote? How much is done remotely? How much is done on ground full time? Dan, can you take that question if you would?
Yeah, it really depends very much on the scope and uh, and the timetable for implementation. If it's a major restructuring or a relocation, um, we found is at least through the early stages of the planning, and then certainly through execution of any announcements and physical changes, physical relocations, then usually it requires full-time project management. Uh, uh, if it's something not quite that is different, if it's a supplier change, for example, um, normally we like to have quality engineers on in place during trial runs and test runs. Again, that's not full time for the duration of the project, but it's certainly there for a few weeks around a big event.
So we got a question that's popped up. Someone was asking about the amount of time it takes. So I'm just pulling up the slide right here, which is examples of 5 different kind of projects we're doing. Li Xiao and Dan, can y'all kind of address their question, which is how long does it take for these to be completed? And I know it's a very subjective question, but they were talking about like the quality control improvement. How long would that take versus insourcing and outsourcing suppliers versus wind down, relocate a factory within China? Can you talk about the timing it takes?
Yeah,
Li Xiao, why don't you start off with that
sure.
question?
Usually, commercial transformation. For instance, we talk about distribution change or finding new distributors or finding new customers. That's probably 6 to 12 months, so roughly a year. Relocation and winding down, that will be longer, maybe around 18 months, roughly. Could be 24 months, which is 2 years, depending on the scale of the factory and how many factories we are dealing with. Insourcing versus outsourcing, that also depends on the product categories. If it's, let's say, 4 or 5, roughly will be around 6 to 12 months timeframe to find the qualified suppliers and also do initial kind of validation. That's about that time frame. Quality control, it's about 6 to 8 months. Roughly can be shorter, 3 to 6 months also, if the product range is relatively limited. It's more of training how we emphasize the quality process. So that would take most of the time actually. Integration or carve out, that's also it could be major, could be 2 years, because of the planning on how many factories or operation to be integrated and carve out process also. But all in all these all these transformation, main thing would, depending on the product range, and also how many facilities we're talking about.
Anything you would add to that?
Well, I think one on the integration or carve out activities. The full execution of that could easily be 2 years. But I think in terms of where the major amount of activity is, it's 3 months, first 100 days of a post acquisition or sale, is when the heaviest activity occurs, and then it can continue over time. Yeah.
Right, and that quality control project you all just split on, that was heavy on the first 3 months, right? I
Yeah,
mean, it continued after that.
you get to see the major progress. Took about 3 months, and then after that, it's sort of takes a little. It continues, but it more stabilization. So.
Right. Okay, going back, we're almost out of time. So going back to the actual questions we've got, one question came up that we were talking about is when you are uh, when you are putting together a define question number 10, when you're defining a project, right, whether it's been executed, how do you define those deliverables up front? Say it's quality control, right, product transformation, or it's insourcing. They want to start to get away from insourcing. Now they're doing more outsourcing to supplier. How do you define those deliverables up front? Because you've got to have those metrics defined from the client up front. How do most companies set those parameters for themselves before they begin the project? Dan, if you will take that, start off with that question.
Yeah. Well, usually we would have a list of multiple criteria for success, and we'd look at schedule or timetable? Was it target timetable? Look at either savings or costs, um, cost improvements, savings on purchases. Um, Generally look at that in terms of a percentage rather than a necessarily dollar amount. Um, uh, in the case of shutdown of a facility, be looking at again timetable, but also budget. We prepare a budget in advance and adhere to that, both for severance and out-of-pocket expenses. So those are some of the sort of ways that we would measure success going in.
Right. No, yeah. Alicia, anything you would add to that?
Yeah, sometimes when we do relocation when we mentioned the case study, that's also depending on where what customer require, what kind of a size, what kind of um, um, office location, right? So or industrial
Yep.
parks. So we can put that also in the scope and make sure that we deliver the right um, um, options.
For the client, absolutely, yeah. Because and we're finding some of the times the China team doesn't have that metric, so we've got to try to provide that to them. All right. Well, look, I know we've gone a little over. I want to thank Dan McLeod, and I want to thank Lee Xiao for taking the time. I want to thank the audience for asking good questions. You will be sent a survey, and you will also be sent a recording and the this deck presentation. Please feel free to contact us if you have any follow up questions. And thank you again. This ends today's webinar on this today. Thank you. Bye bye.